Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So I would like to invite you to consider for a moment the concept of the pre-holiday marketing campaign in America. You know, when weeks, sometimes months before a given holiday, you start to see the respective colors or decorations for said holiday, or the products for purchase for said holiday, and when they appear in retail stores or online or wherever it might be. I learned the other day that this phenomena has a name when it comes to Christmas time for retailers and marketers. It's called the Christmas creep. And it literally is, you may have noticed that you used to expect to see this marketing campaign begin after Thanksgiving, but now it actually starts the day after Halloween, the Christmas creep. Interestingly, though, this pre-holiday marketing concept exists in Judaism too, but not for the purpose of product sales. We have a long tradition, as it happens, 2,000 years at least, of creating awareness and preparation for approaching holidays through the designation of specific and special Shabbats or Shabbatot, which lead up to a given holiday. And as it happens, tonight marks the first of the 2 consecutive special Shabbats that lead up to the holiday of... Oh, good! Yay, winning! That was great! Purim! This week, I'm not going to ask you this. Maybe I should, since you aced Purim. Does anybody know what the special Shabbat this week is called? Well, I can't hear you. I don't know, I can't hear you, but none of it has sounded like the correct answer. So this week is called Shabbat Shkalim. And it highlights probably a ritual that you are likely not so familiar with, a ritual of the half-shekel donation, which everyone who was donating was told to offer to the original temple at the original temple in Jerusalem. And there's a few special features about this ritual, but of note is that every donor, regardless of their financial capacity, was instructed to contribute the exact same amount, and in this case, the amount was the half shekel, nothing more and nothing less. So we have to ask the question, well, why? Why did everyone have to donate the same amount? And why was that amount not even a full unit of currency, rather just a half of it? And I read a commentary this week that really resonated with me interpreting this idea. So Rabbi Shrega Simmons teaches that by giving only a half, each person was to realize that they'd never become complete unless they were a part of the larger community. Accordingly, Jewish law stated that every donor, regardless of social standing or financial situation, was to give no more or no less than exactly half a shekel. We can see from that the tradition's stressing of the message that every person is equally important to the community we are all creating together. And to do that, the donation amount needed to be accessible to everyone, because in Jewish tradition, no person is greater or lesser than any other. Just as removing one letter invalidates an entire Torah scroll, so too in our tradition, the loss of any single person hinders our collective destiny. There's a lot riding on each and every person. At the core of that teaching, for everyone, I think, is the idea that we are not each a universe in and of ourselves alone, as modernity might want us to believe. But rather, we are interdependent. We need one another. We are part of something greater than and beyond ourselves, something in which each of us matters. And that's something we need to remember, according to our tradition, for ourselves in relation to the others in our community, which naturally limits what could otherwise become an unjustified sense of entitlement, misleading us to allow ourselves to cut others out of the project of the Jewish community. And at the very same time, it's something that we need to remember for the others in our community in relation to ourselves, reminding us of the fact that each of us is in fact necessary. We cannot or should not opt out or not do our part as individuals, because to do that would undoubtedly negatively impact, if not sabotage, everyone else involved, no less the entire community project as a whole. So 2 additional questions then. What does any of this have to do with Purim? And why should we care today? So think back to the Purim story. What was the biggest threat to the Jews in the story? Or perhaps I should have said, who was the biggest threat to the Jews in the story? Boo! Right, okay, good. Yeah, Sella. That was awesome. Haman, or so we're taught. But as it turns out, the Talmud teaches that the most significant threat to the Jews in the Purim story was not Haman, but instead was the Jewish people's lack of unified identity. Yeah, they don't teach you that in the Purim spiel in 4th grade. So in the Megillah, when Haman first tried to get King Achashverosh to agree to destroy the Jews, Achashverosh hesitated, actually. Not so fast, he said. I'm actually afraid of the Jews' God, lest that God do to me what that God did to my predecessors. Haman, ever clever, relieves the king of his concerns when he says this famous line. In Hebrew, it's Yeshno Am Echad. Literally, there is a singular people, referring to the Jewish people. But the Talmud explains that Haman's words actually have a deeper meaning, something more strategic, but you have to know what he's referencing. That Hebrew word, yeshno, can be pronounced differently, not to mean there is, but instead to mean sleeping. And so according to the Talmud's Midrash, Haman was actually saying, there is a people that is entirely asleep, who are negligent in their religious identity, they are divided, they fight with one another over ridiculous items of observance, they are arguing amongst themselves, but at the same time they are fast asleep as to what we want to do, we, Haman, want to do, and how we threaten them. And in this sense, ironically, it was Haman who reminded us that regardless of the fissures that we might create through our own community, in the eyes of the anti-Semite, we are all the same. I'm so struck by how timely this teaching is for us in our world today in so many ways. And for our purposes tonight, I'd like to suggest for those of us who make up the vast and diverse community of Jews and those who love them, if we didn't feel it before October 7th, then certainly now we must recognize the existential threats facing us, not just in Israel, but the incredibly concerning state of affairs for Jews in the diaspora, no less right here in America. If you want to get really depressed about this, read Franklin Foer's The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending in the Atlantic that came out earlier this week. I think it is a critically important piece, but you should gird yourself before you read it. And I must confess, though, that right alongside these existential threats from the outside, I am just as, if not more, worried about the state of our Am Echad, our supposed single community. Amidst this destructive climate of political and identity polarization to which the Jewish community has fallen victim. Will we be able to hold ourselves together? Or will we, like the Talmud suggests in the Purim story, prove our own greatest threat? Interestingly, the traditions associated with the build-up to Purim offer us a really accessible way forward, beyond this donation of a half shekel, because who's got a half shekel, let's be honest. First, consider mishloach manot, the custom of making and then giving small gifts of treats to others in the lead up to and on Purim. In particular, Jewish tradition teaches that it's particularly virtuous to give mishloach manot to someone with whom you have been in conflict, to someone who sees things differently than you do. This can remind us that there is more to our relationships than just the topics about which we disagree. And that helps to strengthen our unity, shrinking the vulnerabilities of which modern Hamans always take advantage. We're also taught to give matanot le'evyonim, to give tzedakah or charity to at least 2 people, so that no one goes without at a time that is supposed to be about celebration and joy. If you want to talk about rituals of inclusion, it doesn't get better than Purim. The Talmud reminds us, Kol Yisrael aravim ze bazeh. Every member of our community is responsible for one another. It doesn't offer a caveat with that or an out clause with the exception of. Everyone is in. And that might be perhaps the most important message that deserves all the airtime and marketing in the world, not just in the lead up to Purim, but for the entirety of the Jewish community every day of the week. Shabbat Shalom.